Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rita Glavin, and I think most of you know that I am the attorney for former Governor Andrew M. Cuomo. The reason I'm speaking with you today is because we have been asked on a number of occasions what the governor's next steps may be with respect to evidence that we've pointed out a number of occasions of what we believe to be misconduct in the Attorney General's manner of the investigation, the issuing of the report, and also, and I'll talk a little bit about it today, actions that the Attorney General took after she issued her report on August 3rd. Now, as I've said to you, and it has been included in our 165-page submission, which we sent to the Attorney General on October 20th, asking her to amend her report, is that her report had materially misleading information. It was flawed, did not include exculpatory information, and because of that, she needed to correct and amend the report. Okay. This was important because when the Attorney General came out on August 3rd, she promoted her report as truth, that it shouldn't be questioned, that it was undeniable fact. She released her report, and she didn't release any of the evidence. She claimed that there were 11 women, and she wanted the public to believe, and the press, that Governor Cuomo was a serial sexual harasser of 11 women. And the press, without having read the entire report that she issued, or even asked the Attorney General, we see your report, but show us all the underlying evidence. Show us the transcripts. Show us the 138 informal interviews. No one asked the Attorney General for that. And everyone ran out and reported that the governor sexually harassed 11 women. And then still, the Attorney General, without having released all of the evidence to us, despite our asking, and our asking so that we could respond to the Assembly, after Sheriff Apple filed his criminal charge against the governor, she went out and said, this is going to validate the findings of our report. And then the next day, the Attorney General did what she planned to do all along, which is she announced that she was running for governor on October 29th. So between August 3rd and October 29th, the Attorney General issued a report, didn't release any of the evidence, and then announced her run for governor because she didn't want you to question her report. She certainly did not want me to see the evidence that undermined the report and contradicted the findings. So after she did all this, we now know, having only gotten some of the evidence, and the only reason we got some of the evidence was because of Sheriff Apple's complaint that was filed against the governor and wisely dismissed because the complaint just simply wasn't true and the evidence didn't support it. But we knew back in August, I have said this before, the evidence shows it's not 11 women, it's 0. When you look at the evidence and you apply it to the law, 0 women were sexually harassed. Five district attorneys opened investigations based on the Attorney General's report and her prejudicial press conference. 5 district attorneys reviewed the evidence. And after looking at the evidence and looking at the law, those 5 district attorneys all announced that they're not going to bring charges. That's because Governor Cuomo did not sexually harass anybody. The Attorney General, for months, after accusing him of being a serial sexual harasser, something that she still does to this day, but doesn't answer a single substantive question about the problems with her report, the glaring omissions, and her failure to include very exculpatory evidence, she hasn't responded to any of our requests. She's ignored our requests to amend or correct the report where she knows there are errors. She ignored our request, and still does today, for all of the evidentiary materials underlying the report. Why won't she give me the evidence? She's a chief legal officer of the state. Don't go around accusing people and then not give their lawyer the evidence. But what she has done, and all she has done, is she has publicly dismissed our valid concerns to the chief legal officer of the state, concerns she should take seriously. She calls my presentations or comments when I talk about facts and evidence attacks, lies, and conspiracy theories. She called, when we submitted a 150-page application pointing out problems and omissions in a report, she called it a charade. I call it the truth. I call it evidence. I call it process. Then what happened? After not having released any of the underlying evidence, and there was a lot, after Attorney General Letitia James announced she was running for governor on October 29th, she decided to selectively release some transcripts, okay? Beginning on November 10th, 12 days after the Attorney General announced she was running for governor, she released a handful of transcripts. She released the transcripts of the 11 alleged complainants and the governor. Why didn't she release all 41 that day? She'd had months to do it. And it's clear. She wanted to damage Governor Andrew Cuomo, to advance her gubernatorial campaign, because she'd been refusing to release the transcripts up to that point. She wanted to also hurt who she viewed as a primary political opponent with, $15 to $18 million in his war chest. That's why she did it. There's no other reason. And not only did she selectively release transcripts on November 10th, she also selectively left some information unredacted in those transcripts, even though the Attorney General's office had reason to believe it was false. And then she also redacted pertinent information that would undermine the credibility of a complainant. There was no reason, no legal reason, for the Attorney General to selectively and slow roll the release of some of the 41 transcripts, and keep in mind 179 people were interviewed. There was no legal reason to release those while investigations by those 5 district attorneys, who all declined to bring charges, were ongoing. And let me just point to what the Attorney General said on September 1st, when we were banging the table because the Assembly Judiciary Committee had asked me as the governor's lawyer to make a submission to them on the sexual harassment issues raised by the Attorney General's report. And I begged to get access to the underlying evidence so that we could have a meaningful submission. The Assembly wouldn't give me the evidence, the Attorney General wouldn't give me the evidence, and the only conclusion you can draw is because they didn't want a decent submission. They didn't want to expose the problems with the report. And how the Attorney General got out of it is she said, I can't release the transcripts. The district attorneys have asked me not to release the transcripts, and we're cooperating with them. So I ask, why did the Attorney General then, on November 10th, 12 days after she announced her run for governor, and again on November 29th, decide to release some of the transcripts, even though those 5 district attorneys still had investigations pending? There was no legal reason. The chief legal officer of our state released transcripts using her office for political purposes. And what is inexcusable is that the transcript she chose to release while she was running for governor in her 5-week campaign, the 2 tranches on November 10th and November 29th, notably did not include what was exculpatory information, exculpatory transcripts. Those were released after the Attorney General ended her campaign for governor. She released them on January 20th. There were approximately 16 of those transcripts, and the information in those transcripts by those individuals, such as Dave Dively, who headed up the governor's detail, such as Melissa McGrath's husband, directly undermined the report's finding and testimony. Why? I asked the Attorney General. Because this was misconduct, and she misused state resources for political gain. How can she explain broadcasting to witnesses what other witnesses have said when 5 district attorneys had ongoing investigations and asked her not to do so. That's wrong, and it needs to be addressed. There were 179 people interviewed. We have only seen transcripts for 41. There were 138 people informally interviewed, some more than once. All of those memos have never been provided to us. We got some memos because of Sheriff Apple's rogue complaint triggered discovery obligations, and we got some memos, but we don't have all of them. The Attorney General collected 74,000 documents. She didn't give them to us, and she won't give them to us. Every time a comment is made that we've released thousands of pages of documents and exhibits, that's not the full truth, and the Attorney General knows it. The vast majority of the evidence collected in this case has never been given to us, the governor's attorneys, and the Assembly has never given us any of their evidence. We know why, because of what we have seen and we have showed is consistent with what we've said all along, which is that the governor didn't sexually harass anybody. There are not 11 women, it's 0. I want to talk about the selective redactions that the Attorney General did. So in the first tranche of transcripts she released 12 days after she announced she was running for governor, despite the fact she said she wouldn't release the transcripts because district attorneys had asked her not to. She included Trooper 1 hearsay testimony. She left it in there. Trooper 1 claimed that a senior investigator had seen the governor and a senior staffer kissing on the lips, okay? Claimed that she was told this by Senior Investigator 1. Well, the Attorney General had evidence that this was not true, and she didn't release it. The Attorney General interviewed informally that Senior Investigator 1, and the Attorney General's investigators were told by Senior Investigator 1 he never saw the governor and the senior staffer kissing. Why would you leave and put out in the public domain while you are running for governor hearsay testimony that you knew when you went to the source said, I never saw any such thing? Why would you do that? You do it for political purposes. You do it so papers like the New York Post, and they did, will run a story about it. Why didn't the Attorney General's office say, oh, we did interview the trooper that purportedly, claimed to have seen this, and that trooper was quite clear that he did not see them kissing? That's wrong, it's misconduct, and there must be accountability. Another example of the selective redactions. On the first tranche of transcripts that the Attorney General will release, despite saying she would not because of ongoing investigations, but she was running for governor, and so the calculus changed. The Attorney General's office redacted 7 pages of Lindsay Boylan's transcript. 7 pages of it. And what was in the 7 pages? Well, I now know because of the Sheriff Apple charge that was dismissed because it couldn't be proven because it was false. I know, and in the 7 pages, Lindsay Boylan testified about the nature of her relationship with her boss at ESD, Howard Zemsky. This is the man that she threatened to destroy his life, something the Attorney General left out of the report. And what Lindsay Boylan testified to under oath was not what Howard Zemsky told them. Lindsay Boylan denied having had a sexual relationship or encounter with Howard Zemsky. And Howard Zemsky, on July 8th, in an informal interview, said in late 2017, they did. Why was it redacted from Lindsay Boylan's testimony? And it was because it undermined her credibility. And when the Attorney General heard from Howard Zemsky, why was Lindsay Boylan not called back in? There was evidence that there was perjury. And there was evidence that there was witness tampering. The Attorney General did not look into this, and it warrants an investigation. The investigators had an obligation to follow up on evidence that witnesses had lied to them. They had an obligation to follow up on evidence and report it to the public that a witness threatened to destroy another witness's life. Attorney General did not do that. That's the chief legal officer of our state, and there needs to be accountability for that. The Attorney General found Lindsey Boylan to be credible about the strip poker comment on the ground that Howard Zemsky, with whom she had had more than a professional relationship, yet she denied that, independently corroborated her about the strip poker comment. Yet Mr. Zemsky initially didn't have an inkling of any such comment, and in fact signed on to a statement after Lindsey Boylan said this publicly in an essay, saying the conversation didn't happen. The governor hadn't made such a comment. But then the same day that Mr. Zemsky signed on to that statement, Ms. Boylan sent him on an encrypted, self-destructing text message using the Confide app, "I can't wait to destroy your life. Your shit follower." The Attorney General did not include this message in the report. The Attorney General did not ask Lindsey Boylan about this, did not bring her back in to say, why did you send that message? Have you sent similar messages to other people using the Confide app? And it was after Mr. Zemsky had his "I can't wait to destroy your life" threat that he changed his story. Attorney General didn't look into this, and they had an obligation to. There was another example, and we talked about this some time ago, but early on in 2020, March and April, before Ms. Boylan made her allegations, she sent threatening messages to two members of the governor's staff, saying that her memory is long and so are my resources, and the future is coming after a-holes. The Attorney General in Lindsey Boylan's formal transcript testimony did not confront her with those text messages. What did you mean? Were you planning to come after the governor? Why? All of this was relevant to her credibility. There was also another witness who was a close friend of Lindsey Boylan, witness number 1. She had an informal interview memo which the Attorney General has not publicly released. We've seen this memo because of discovery in the criminal case. And in that memo, this witness worked for Ms. Boylan together for years, considered them to be, they were close personal friends. And this witness told the Attorney General that she was surprised by Ms. Boylan's allegations because Ms. Boylan had not mentioned them to her before, and that they had the type of relationship where she would have thought Ms. Boylan might mention that she shared these types of views about the governor. And then in March of 2020, this particular witness gets a series of texts from Ms. Boylan, and when Ms. Boylan didn't get a response within an hour, Ms. Boylan texted her, "I hope your lack of courage was worth it. You had a friend in me for life, but now you don't, bitch. Good luck." How come she was not asked about that? Attorney General knew that. How come that's not referenced in the report? The series of threats and evidence that Ms. Boylan lied under oath had to be explored by the chief legal officer of the state, who was supposed to have an independent law firm, not the AG do the report or the investigation, independent law firm. How come this was not explored? Couldn't have been more relevant to the credibility. The failure to do so is misconduct because the report becomes misleading. Alyssa McGrath, another example. Alyssa McGrath is another complainant. She has been best friends with Brittany Camiso since the 9th grade. Ms. Camiso alleges that in this selfie, which was taken on December 31st of 2019, that the governor sexually or forcibly groped her right before this photo was taken, and that she was nervous and that she was shaken up by it. She then sent that photo while she was still there to Alyssa McGrath. And Alyssa McGrath's response, "Where's my pic? I'm officially jealous. Photoshop me in there. I love this so much." Well, here's what happened when the Attorney General's investigators interviewed Ms. McGrath, when they confronted her with this text message, because Brittany Camiso framed this picture as evidence that she had been forcibly groped and harassed that day. Here is what...
Is this the text message in which Ms. Camiso shared with you a picture she had taken with Governor Andrew Cuomo?
Yes.
And she shared the picture and you wrote, "Where is my pic? I'm officially jealous." Why were you officially jealous?
I felt like I needed to say that considering she was with him and he asked that it be sent to me. So she sent that in real time to me. So I felt like I could be like, not rude.
How did you know that he had asked that she send you this picture?
I knew after the fact when she called me.
Okay.
And
so you wrote the "I'm officially jealous" before that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, yeah, yep.
So recognizing that she told you after the fact that he had asked her to send it, do you remember why you said "I'm officially jealous"? Is this the text message in which Ms. Camiso shared with you a picture she had taken with Governor Andrew Cuomo?
Yes.
And she shared the picture and you wrote, "Where is my pic? I'm officially jealous." Why were you officially jealous?
I felt like I needed to say that considering she...
So what happened here is that the investigators are questioning Alyssa McGrath about this. Alyssa McGrath gets caught in a lie, that her text message saying, well, he asked her to send that photo to me, and therefore I felt I had to send this text back. And the investigators knew, no, that's impossible because she didn't learn until after the fact. She gets caught in this, and yet they still credit her testimony. This is Brittany Camiso's best friend. They credit her testimony, and they don't say, well, excuse me, why did you just say to us something that could not have happened, that was not true? Report found her credible. And the Attorney General's report never mentions the testimony of her ex-husband, who was actually together with her in 2020. They don't even mention his testimony. And the Attorney General chose not to release Matthew McGrath's testimony until January 20th of this year, after she had ended her campaign. And in his testimony, he makes clear that Ms. McGrath did not complain about the governor, that she had photos of the governor next to her bed. Why did the Attorney General not go back to Ms. McGrath and say, you're claiming now that he made you uncomfortable and was improper with you, but you're saying something different and not giving any suggestion to your husband? And why didn't the AG release it or cite to it? Why didn't she release that transcript while she was running for governor? And it's because she did a selective, slow roll, a misuse of her office for her political campaign. The other issue is that when the Attorney General got contradicting evidence about when Ms. Camiso first disclosed her allegations against the governor, they didn't explore this or confront Ms. Camiso or Ms. McGrath, her best friend, during the investigation. According to Brittany Camiso, the first time that she says she spoke to anyone in detail about the incidents that she claimed happened with the governor was on March 3rd, which was a Wednesday, 2021. She said it was definitely when the announcement, he made the press conference that day, and who she told were 2 other executive assistants, not Alyssa McGrath. But Melissa McGrath told a different story. What Melissa McGrath told investigators in both her informal interview memo, which the Attorney General didn't release, but we have, and in her testimony was that no, Brittany Camiso had told her days earlier, over the weekend, when Charlotte Bennett's allegations became public. She told the investigators it was on Sunday. Bennett's allegations became public. Brittany went to Alyssa's home, and she revealed to McGrath the governor had touched her butt, and also touched her, which she believed to be inappropriate on occasions. But Ms. Camiso insisted no. It was several days later, I told the other people. Why was that not explored? Why were Ms. Camiso and Ms. McGrath, best friends, not asked about what were you discussing? Have you discussed what you told us during informal interviews? Did you discuss what you were going to say during your under oath interviews? That line of questioning did not happen when they were under oath. And you have to ask yourself why, because the Attorney General had contradictory evidence and deliberately didn't follow up on it. In addition, during the course of Ms. Camiso's testimony, take a look at the transcript at page 147 to 48. Ms. Camiso tells the Attorney General's investigators that when she went to the governor's mansion on the day she claims the governor touched her breast forcibly, she claims that she was wearing an overcoat. When she went into his office, she was there for a short time. That is something she didn't tell the Times-Union when she was interviewed on April 7th, or if she did, it wasn't included in their article, the anonymous article. But what the investigators realized in questioning Ms. Camiso is that it would be problematic if she had an overcoat on, and problematic to her claim that the governor suddenly reached under her blouse over her bra. And so they gave her at least 5 opportunities to get her testimony to fix it. Here are some of the questions. So when you went in, were you zipped and belted up? At what point did you put the jacket back on? Now, I want to make sure I got this straight. He said, take your coat off. You took your coat off. You put it back up before he came around and groped you. Isn't that right? The investigator's manner of questioning was to steer Brittany Camiso to facts that would support the predetermined narrative, because her testimony simply was not credible on this point. And every time she has given a version of her story, it is a different one. So what are the next steps, okay? I've gone through in detail a number of times, banging, my head against the wall, asking the press to ask hard questions. I have asked hard questions of the Attorney General. The Attorney General won't answer beyond saying the governor needs to move on, and she calls him a serial sexual harasser, ignoring the fact that the evidence shows there were 0 women sexually harassed. The evidence and the law support the governor, and that's the limited evidence that we've seen. What can the governor do about this? And these are going to be the immediate steps. I don't know that these will be the only steps, but he feels strongly that there was misconduct here, that the Attorney General misused her office for political purposes, and that couldn't be more apparent with her decision to release some transcripts when she decided to run for governor, after she told everyone that she was not going to release transcripts because the district attorneys had investigations. Well, they still did, and she decided to release them after she ran for governor. And the manner in which she released them and chose redactions shows that she wanted to protect a report that she knew was flawed. So we are going to renew our requests once again to the Attorney General, and we're also going to ask the Assembly, will you please give us all of the underlying evidence? Because what the Attorney General keeps saying is 2 reports have corroborated this. Yeah, 2 reports where you won't give us the evidence. And the Assembly has never said how many people they ever even interviewed with respect to the sexual harassment investigation. The Assembly piggybacked off the Attorney General's investigation and their findings. There was little done, in my view, based on what I've seen in their report, that was independent. But why not release the evidence to us? Why not? The chairman of the Judiciary Committee is a good lawyer. He's a former defense lawyer. He understands the importance of giving someone who's accused evidence. They won't do it. So we're going to renew our requests. We also believe that the evidence of witness tampering and perjury that came out during the investigation has to be investigated. And the Attorney General has failed to do so, even though she has the right to do so during an investigation if there's evidence of perjury. We're considering what we will do on that front, but I expect that we will be sending letters to the relevant district attorney's office asking them to look at the evidence and do a criminal investigation, because this cannot be left unaccounted for. I have also renewed my request to the Law Enforcement Misconduct Office that they investigate Sheriff Apple based on the evidence we have that he leaked unlawfully secret grand jury information to the press. And I hope that the Law Enforcement Misconduct Office will refer, because that's a felony, if in fact Sheriff Apple did that, and I hope that the Law Enforcement Misconduct Office will refer any evidence that they gather to a district attorney's office for investigation and prosecution if warranted. Finally, the governor has given this a great deal of thought. And because of how the investigation was conducted and what he believes to be misconduct, the governor is going to personally, it's not me, the governor is going to personally make a complaint to the Attorney Grievance Committee of the state Supreme Court that he's going to sign, addressing what he believes to be serious ethics concerns regarding the manner of the investigation, the report, and the conduct by the Attorney General's office since March of 2021, and also in the selective slow roll release of the transcripts. The report was and always will be misleading and unreliable, unfair, and no process. The Attorney General then announces she's running for governor after the deck was cleared based on her report for which she wouldn't release the evidence. There must be accountability, and the chief legal officer will never be inclined to examine what happened here. There has to be accountability. And so the governor is going to seek that because he wants the truth and he wants to be treated fairly. Okay, any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Glavin. If you would like to ask a question, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of your window. We will take a brief moment to compile the Q&A roster. Ms. Glavin, your first question comes from Michael Gromley of Newsday. Michael,
Hi, Mr. Gromley.
please
How are
unmute
you?
your microphone.
Good, thank you. Can you explain what potentially could come about with this complaint that's filed? What's the maximum, I guess, penalties or sanctions?
There are, the governor has looked at this, and attorneys are held, we have rules of professional conduct that we have to follow in the state of New York. And, one of the rules that I know the governor has been focused on is that attorneys shouldn't engage in conduct that's prejudicial to the administration of justice. I don't want to get into any types of penalties, but there are complaints made routinely to attorney grievance committees about attorneys violating those rules of professional conduct. And I think, when you act as a member of our profession, and particularly if you're the chief legal officer of the state, your job is to do the right thing, to play by the rules. And in this particular case, the governor feels strongly that there was misconduct in the manner in which this investigation was conducted. And he thinks that the Attorney Grievance Committee should look at this, which is why he personally is going to do the complaint. And, there's a whole range of things that grievance committees can do, to censuring somebody, suspending a legal license. I'm not going to speculate to what they might do, but, in the governor's view, what has occurred to date, and there are many, many examples of it, is misconduct.
Thank you.
Ms. Glavin, your next question comes from Dan Clark from New York Now. Dan, please unmute your microphone.
Hello,
Hi, Rita,
Mr. Clark. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
So just wondering, with a complaint to the grievance committee, is this just against the AG, or is the governor going to file separate complaints against the investigators as well? And if not, why not also file complaints against them?
I don't know, because this is going to be his written submission, and I don't know if he's decided, the list of people. I certainly know that the Attorney General will be included in it, and I would imagine any investigators that he thinks were part of misconduct, that it should be looked at.
Thank you.
Ms. Glavin, your next question comes from Marina from AP. Marina, please unmute your microphone.
Hi, Marina. How are you?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. It's good to hear from you.
Okay, thank you. So my question is regarding your comment about Cuomo there not being evidence that Cuomo sexually harassed anyone. I was wondering whether you meant that under criminal or civil statute. As you know, the sexual harassment law that Cuomo signed was lauded for lowering the bar of sexual harassment and making it easier to hold employees accountable without necessarily sending them to jail, and that civil sexual harassment doesn't require intent, like someone who's in an office and who hears off-color jokes told by other workers.
You're fading out. Marina, you're fading out.
Raise sexual harassment claim theoretically, and that perpetrator could face like civil penalties. I was just looking to clarify. Sorry.
You faded
Sorry.
out.
I was just looking to clarify. Are you saying that Cuomo didn't sexually harass anyone under the civil definition of sexual harassment?
Yes, I am. Absolutely. And the civil definition.
I'm gonna try somewhere else. Are you saying that the governor didn't sexually harass anyone under this?
Yes. Yes, under both state and federal law, he did not sexually harass anyone. It is zero. And what was notable to me about the Attorney General's report is that they failed to apply the law to all of these 11 instances. And there's a reason they didn't, is because most of them, even if you assume they're true, don't rise to the level of sexual harassment. What the Attorney General also didn't do is mention that petty slights and trivial inconveniences are not sexual harassment, even under New York law. In addition, the Attorney General's report did not address, because it has to be gender-based. So what I find interesting is, they're claiming he's asking people about their personal lives. They point out with Trooper 1, he kissed Trooper 1 on the cheek. Well, what the report doesn't include, and we know from seeing just a sliver of the evidence that we got from Sheriff Apple's errant complaint, and that's the only thing I'll thank Sheriff Apple for, is that we had to get some of the evidence. But what the Attorney General didn't include is the number of men that talked about, yes, the governor would greet me with a kiss. The head of the governor's detail, Mr. Dively, whose transcript was released on January 20th, amongst the 16 transcripts that undermine the accusers and support the governor, he talked about as being on the detail and the governor kissing him. So when you're talking about whether it is sexual harassment, you also have to look at whether it's gender-based. And there was no examination of that meaningful in the Attorney General's report. So yes, our position is that if you look at all the evidence and the law, he didn't sexually harass a single person, not a single person. The fact that 5 DAs looked at this, and yes, they were looking under criminal law, but the Attorney General also made findings that he forcibly touched people. Well, the DAs weren't going to bring any charges after looking at all the evidence. And that's because he didn't. Next question.
Are you saying that
Are you following up? That's fine, Marina.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Is it up to an alleged perpetrator to decide whether something is more than a petty slight or trivial inconvenience? The governor had apologized initially if any of his comments were misinterpreted.
Absolutely.
As flirty, the state's sexual harassment policy says that flirty jokes or unwanted flirtations count as sexual harassment. Or
the state policy is not the law. And the governor, when people say the governor hasn't accepted any accountability, I've seen the Attorney General say that repeatedly. He has most definitely apologized if he made anyone feel uncomfortable. Kissing someone on the cheek is not sexual harassment. It just isn't. You have to look at the context. You have to look at the overall behavior. And in our view, the governor didn't violate the law. Now, when you say, you say the perpetrator? First of all, Governor Cuomo is not a perpetrator. Let's be clear. I'm tired of that buzzword. The report makes it that way because they want you to believe that. And then they don't show you the evidence. And the reason they don't show you the evidence is because the evidence undermines what they told the world. And they need to be held accountable for it. You can't do a misleading report as the chief legal officer of the state of New York and then run around and say you can't question this. And if you question it, you're smearing and attacking. You can't do that. People have a right to talk about the evidence. They have a right to talk about credibility determinations, and they have a right to talk about political motivations when they are the subject of what just happened over the last 10 months. And the press didn't cover it in August. Everyone wanted to run out and say he's a harasser. The other thing that has to be addressed is the evidence that the Attorney General had that there was perjury during her investigation. I can tell you when I was in AUSA and I was conducting investigations, and if a witness comes in and they lie to me, there's ramifications. If I find out that they lied to me, they are back in. I'm on the phone with their lawyer. It's serious. And the Attorney General, as far as I can tell, with the limited evidence I've seen, ignored it and didn't confront the witnesses and then ran out to the world and said, I believe women. Well, at least one of the women, she knows there's evidence that she didn't tell her the truth.
Ms. Glavin, your next question comes from Joe Spector of Politico. Joe, please unmute your microphone.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Rita, there's been a lot of talk over the last week or so about the governor coming back out, doing public events, trying to, quote unquote, vindicate himself. Do you anticipate him doing public events, or even there's talk about him running for office again this year? Do you envision those things happening here in the short term, making himself more public to try to dispute all the things you've been talking about here?
One is, I do expect that you are going to be hearing from the governor relatively soon on this issue. Can't give you the date, but I know he's planning to make some comments. Secondly, with respect to whether or not he's going to run for office, I don't know the answer to that. I'm his lawyer. Third point I want to make, I've made it repeatedly, he will not let this go. It is insulting to tell someone who has been wrongly accused and treated unfairly, just move on, just move on. No, no. He's not going to move on because truth is important, process is important. Misconduct cannot get swept under the rug. If witnesses have lied and there's evidence of it, there must be accountability. So he's not going to move on. Vindication, they have a saying, lies will make it around the world 10 times before the truth even has a chance. Well, we've been working really hard
just to follow up if I can. Yeah. Just to follow up if I can. He did resign.
Yes.
So if he felt so strongly about this, shouldn't he have stayed in office and fought it that way?
A lot of people say that. Well, he resigned. That's proof of it. But what people don't understand is that almost all of the members of the assembly, which would be voting on impeachment, said he had to resign or they would impeach him. That's what they said, and that's what the report was meant to do. And they said this and opined and said that they would impeach him and vote for impeachment before they had seen any of the evidence. You think he was going to get a fair trial? Then when it went to the Senate, how many senators came out and said that they believed him to be guilty and they would impeach him and he needed to leave office? What do you do then? So the governor stays, knowing that all of the jurors, the vast majority, had weighed in on it before they heard his side, before they saw any of the evidence, because Letitia James didn't want to release it. That's appalling to me. And the reason this happened is because people are afraid to question when it comes to this topic. I believe women. You and I both know men don't tell the truth and women don't tell the truth. But nobody, when it comes to this topic, wanted to do a critical examination of the evidence that the Attorney General wouldn't give. The Assembly wanted him gone, as did the Senate. So he could have stayed, he could have fought, and the state would have been paralyzed for months and months through a trial, while we still had COVID, while we're dealing with serious issues of crime in New York City. The governor resigned not because he believed or acknowledged he'd committed sexual harassment. He resigned because he's a public servant who knew he would not get a fair trial, and he wouldn't have. Go look at what the entire New York congressional delegation had to say about him after that report was issued. And they hadn't seen the evidence. Nobody said, I want to see the evidence. They took the report at face value. And we now know what the report excluded. We know there was evidence that people lied to the investigators, and the Attorney General didn't want anyone to know about that. So stay and fight a losing battle that would end up paralyzing the state of New York to nobody's gain. That's why he resigned.
Ms. Glavin?
It is a sad chapter in New York State history, and one of the reasons he is thinking about these next steps is that what happened here in the misuse of the Attorney General of her office for political gain so that she could get rid of him and run herself for governor, this should never happen in the United States and New York State, and it should never happen again.
Ms. Glavin, your next question comes from Jimmy Valkine from Wall Street Journal. Jimmy, please unmute your microphone.
Jimmy Valkine, it's always a pleasure to hear from you.
Good to see you. Two questions relatively quickly. One, will you be making available the complaint that is filed, and which department will it be filed in?
I actually don't know, because this is what the governor is going to be doing. So I'm I'm sure, he'll have something to say about that.
Okay, so you can't commit to making it public? and that
I'm
it will
not
be made
doing,
public?
I can't commit because I'm not doing the complaint. I do know, when there was a complaint, a number of lawyers filed against Rudy Giuliani, and I think that was made public. I presume that the governor will look to historically how this has been handled. And if he can make this public, I think he will.
Okay, and then just the second question.
But I can't commit because this is something he's doing. I'm not doing this.
Okay, and then just sort of as a second question, you've made some strong statements about your belief and interpretation that there's no civil liability here for sexual harassment. Are you engaged in pre-filing or settlement talks with any women regarding potential lawsuits of sexual harassment against Andrew Cuomo? And if so, what can you tell us about the nature of those conversations?
I'm not going to discuss any conversations if any of them have been had.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Glavin, your next question comes from Rebecca Lewis. Rebecca, please unmute your microphone.
Hi, thanks for taking my question.
Hi, Ms. Lewis.
I'm with City and
I don't think we've met
no,
before.
I'm
who
with
are you
City and State. I'm with City and State.
It's nice to meet you.
I don't have it in my title in the Zoom. I don't know how to change it when I'm in the webinar setting. I just was wondering, all of this conversation has been around the sexual harassment allegations against the governor, but in particular, the impeachment report included far more than just the sexual harassment allegations. Why have we not heard from the governor on any of the other issues that he was facing involving COVID-19 in nursing homes, use of state resources to write his book? Why haven't we heard from him on any of these to the extent that we're hearing from you now about the sexual harassment allegations?
Okay, two things. One is because I'm focused on the sexual harassment allegations, but secondly, that is incorrect. You did hear from the governor. There was a submission that was made to the Assembly on those other topics. The Assembly, I think it was also looking at the Mario Cuomo Bridge. They dropped that because there was no issue with the Mario Cuomo Bridge. Assembly was looking at initially priority COVID-19 testing, and then they dropped that after we pointed out that members of the Assembly had gotten priority COVID-19 testing. With respect to the book and state resources, I think that was also addressed in our submission, but what the governor's position on that has always been is that the people who worked with him on the book, those staffers, it did not in any way take away from state time, and he understood that they were voluntarily assisting him with the book. But one thing I do want to state about this too, and I think this is important and an important issue, is the governor had said about staffers that assist politicians or elected officials with various things, and they're focused on the book. But I think there has to be a real focus on the use of elected officials, of their staffers, for campaign purposes. I find it difficult to believe that if the Attorney General in her 5 weeks of running for governor didn't have some staffers assisting her with campaign-related activities, and certainly the release of those transcripts and the timing of it, as I've said before, I think was a misuse of the office for a political purpose. So we did do a submission to the Assembly. We publicly released a white paper that was written by Morvillo Abramowitz, which addressed the issues of the nursing home. So that has been out there, and the Assembly got that. So it's not the case that the governor didn't talk about those other issues.
But those were also things that could have come up in impeachment. His resignation was not strictly the sexual harassment allegations might have been the most explosive, but there was a plethora of other concerns that, surrounded his resignation. And, there has been relatively little attention since his resignation to those other issues that very well could have led to, impeachment on his part, just the sexual harassment allegations, when there are so many other things
Let me say
that he
this.
could have defended himself against.
Okay, let me say this. When the report, two things. Number one, I do not believe that the governor was going to be impeached on any of those other issues. And he would not have stepped down on any of those other issues because the governor doesn't believe that he engaged in any wrongful conduct. I think that those were just add-ons. Sexual harassment is what drove this train, not those other issues. And the reason we know it drove this train is because that is the issue that within hours after the AG's prejudicial press conference and release of her report with no evidence, that was the issue that caused the entire New York congressional delegation to ask him to step down, not those other issues. That was the issue that had the assembly members saying that he should resign or they were going to impeach him, not the other issues. And in fact, the assembly hadn't even completed their investigation. The resignation was all about the misleading report that he had sexually harassed 11 women. And the day that came out, I honestly felt as though I was trying to stand in front of tsunami because there was a stampede. You say, 11 women, well, there were 0, but no one was going to listen to me, particularly when I don't have the evidence. So he resigned and never got the evidence, and the assembly didn't give him the evidence. So one is we have spoken on those other issues, but 2, I don't believe he would have been impeached on any of those issues, and he would have fought them. The sexual harassment is what drove all of this. And it is shameful that nobody did their jobs and said, I want to see the evidence. And it's shameful that as information is starting to come out that directly undermine that report and the conclusions, that people aren't calling the Attorney General out on it. And it is shameful that the Attorney General, the chief legal officer of our state, instead of engaging in a meaningful, substantive discussion about her report and the problems and the evidence, simply resorts to name-calling against the governor and saying that he needs to move on. I have said it before, I will say it again. Anytime, any place, I will talk with the Attorney General. She and I can have a back and forth about the evidence and the facts. Let's talk substance anytime, any place. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody listening today.